I never wanted him, until the night my best friend's husband looked at me longer than he should. Before we begin, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these emotionally powerful real-life stories. And if this resonates with you, give it a thumbs up and share it. Your support truly matters. Now, let's get into what happened that evening in the garden. My name is Vivian. I'm 35 years old, and 3 months ago I experienced a moment so brief yet so powerful that it fundamentally altered how I see myself, my boundaries, and what I'm capable of feeling for someone I should never have noticed in that way. This isn't a story about an affair or a betrayal that happened. This is about a single moment, maybe 10 seconds long, when my best friend's husband looked at me differently than he'd ever looked at me before, and I felt something awaken inside me that I'd successfully kept dormant for the 7 years I'd known him. A moment where eyes met and held, and everything I thought I understood about my own desires shifted permanently. My best friend Celeste and I have been close since our late 20s, the kind of friendship that forms when you meet someone and immediately recognize a kindred spirit. We bonded over shared interests in art and literature, over similar senses of humor that made long conversations feel effortless. Celeste had been the maid of honor at my wedding 5 years ago, and I'd been hers when she married Adrian 3 years before that. Our lives had been intertwined for over a decade, our friendship one of the most valuable relationships in my life. Adrian had always been exactly what he appeared to be in my perception, Celeste's husband, a man I saw regularly at dinners and parties and social gatherings, someone I'd had hundreds of conversations with over 7 years, but had never thought about independently of his relationship to Celeste. Adrian was an architect, creative and thoughtful in ways that complemented Celeste's more analytical personality. He was tall with dark hair that was always slightly disheveled, had an easy smile that made people comfortable, spoke with quiet confidence that suggested he'd thought carefully before saying anything. Objectively attractive, I suppose, in the way you might note someone is good-looking without it meaning anything personal. But for 7 years, Adrian had existed in a category so off-limits in my mind that attraction was literally impossible. He was Celeste's Adrian. That was his entire identity in my world. I'd never felt anything inappropriate toward Adrian, never caught myself thinking about him at odd moments, never felt my heart race when he entered a room, never experienced any of the signs that would have suggested I saw him as anything other than my best friend's husband. And I was confident in that absence of attraction, confident that some boundaries were so firmly established that they'd never be tested, confident that I knew myself well enough to be certain I'd never develop feelings for someone so completely off-limits. I was wrong about all of it, but I didn't know that until that evening in the garden, until Adrian looked at me in a way he'd never looked at me before, and I felt something I'd never felt before. And everything I thought I knew about my own desires revealed itself as incomplete understanding of who I actually was underneath the careful control I'd maintained. It happened on a Saturday evening in late July. Celeste and Adrian had invited several friends over for a summer dinner party at their house. They had a beautiful property with extensive gardens that Celeste had been cultivating for years, roses and lavender and jasmine creating a sensory experience that was almost overwhelming in its beauty. The dinner party was casual and lovely, maybe 15 people total, a mix of their friends and colleagues gathered around a long table on the patio. Good food, excellent wine, easy conversation that flowed naturally among people who'd known each other for years. The kind of evening where you feel grateful for friendship and community and the simple pleasure of being surrounded by people you care about. As the sun began to set, the party naturally fragmented. Some people migrated inside to see something Celeste wanted to show them. Others clustered in small groups on the patio, deep in conversation. I'd wandered into the garden, drawn by the smell of jasmine that was particularly intense in the evening air. The garden was beautiful in twilight, the fading natural light mixing with the soft glow of patio lights strung through the trees, creating an atmosphere that felt almost dreamlike. I was standing near the jasmine vines, breathing in the scent, completely lost in the moment of sensory pleasure. That's when Adrian appeared. I heard footsteps on the stone path and turned to see him walking toward me, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "I thought you might want a refill," he said, holding out one of the glasses, and I needed an excuse to escape that conversation about cryptocurrency that was happening on the patio. I laughed, accepting the wine. Thank you. And yes, I heard that conversation starting and strategically relocated. Adrian smiled, that easy, comfortable smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. Great minds think alike. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, both of us looking at the garden rather than at each other. This was normal. Adrian and I had had hundreds of these casual interactions over the years. Brief conversations at parties, comfortable silences while waiting for Celeste, the easy dynamic of two people who know each other well through a mutual connection. But then something shifted. I'm still not sure what caused it. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was the garden setting, maybe it was something intangible about the twilight hour when the world feels suspended between day and night. Whatever the reason, I turned to say something to Adrian. I don't even remember what I was about to say, and found him already looking at me. And the look wasn't what I'd expected, wasn't the casual glance of someone making polite conversation. It was something else entirely. Adrian's eyes were fixed on me with an intensity I'd never seen from him before. Not aggressive or uncomfortable, but focused, deliberate, like he was really seeing me. Not as Celeste's friend Vivian who happened to be standing in the garden, but as a woman, as someone he was looking at because he wanted to look at her. The moment stretched. In normal social interaction, when eyes meet, they hold for maybe a second before one person looks away. But Adrian didn't look away. His gaze stayed locked on mine, and in that extended eye contact, I felt something electric pass between us. Some recognition or awareness that hadn't existed 10 seconds earlier, but now felt undeniable and overwhelming. My breath actually caught in my throat in a way that would have been audible if there'd been less ambient noise from the party. My heart did something irregular in my chest, beating too fast and too hard. Heat spread through my body in a wave that started in my core and radiated outward to my fingertips. I was suddenly intensely aware of every physical sensation, the wine glass cool in my hand, the evening breeze against my skin, the scent of jasmine almost overwhelming in its intensity. And Adrian was still looking at me. His expression had shifted, become more vulnerable somehow, like he was letting me see something he usually kept hidden. Like in this moment of extended eye contact, the social masks we all wear had slipped just enough for me to glimpse something raw and real underneath. I don't know what my face showed. Probably shock, probably confusion, probably the dawning awareness that something fundamental was shifting in how I saw this man I'd known for 7 years, but had never truly looked at. Because I was looking now, really looking, and seeing things I'd somehow missed in 7 years of regular interaction. The exact shade of brown his eyes were, darker than I'd realized, with flecks of amber visible in the patio lights. The way his jaw tightened slightly, like he was consciously restraining himself from saying or doing something. The way his chest rose and fell slightly faster than normal, suggesting his breathing had changed the way mine had. The way he was looking at my face, not just my eyes, but tracing over my features like he was memorizing details he'd never paid attention to before. The garden around us faded. The party sounds became distant background noise. The cooling evening air, the scent of flowers, the soft glow of lights through tree branches. All of it receded until there was nothing but Adrian's eyes holding mine, and the space between us that felt simultaneously too much and not nearly enough. I should have looked away, should have broken the moment before it became something that couldn't be taken back or forgotten. Should have laughed and made a joke about being lost in thought or commented on the beautiful garden or done anything to diffuse the tension that was building with every second his eyes stayed on mine. But I didn't look away, couldn't look away, was held in place by the force of whatever was happening between us, unable to move or speak or do anything except feel the awareness, feel the attraction. Feel something awakening inside me that I'd successfully kept buried for 7 years, because Adrian was off limits, and therefore not someone I allowed myself to notice. But I was noticing now. God, I was noticing everything. The way Adrian stood, weight shifted slightly forward like he was leaning toward me, even though the physical distance between us hadn't changed. The way his free hand clenched and unclenched at his side, the only outward sign of whatever internal struggle was happening. The way his lips parted slightly like he was about to speak, but couldn't find words for whatever he wanted to say. And I was noticing things about myself too. The way my body was responding to his gaze. The way every nerve ending felt suddenly alive and sensitive. The way I wanted to close the distance between us, even as I knew with absolute certainty that closing that distance would be crossing a line I could never uncross. "Vivian," Adrian said finally. My name spoken so quietly it was almost a whisper, but the way he said it, with weight and significance and something that sounded like longing, made it feel like a confession, like just saying my name was admitting something he shouldn't admit. I opened my mouth to respond but found I had no idea what to say, no idea how to address what had just happened. No idea how to acknowledge the shift I'd felt without making it more real, more dangerous, more impossible to pretend away. "Adrian, I started, but I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Adrian's eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, some of the intensity had been carefully controlled, the vulnerable expression replaced with something more guarded. "I should get back to the party," he said, his voice rough in a way that betrayed the effort it took to sound normal. Celeste is probably wondering where I disappeared to. The mention of Celeste's name was like cold water, a sharp reminder of reality, of who Adrian was and who I was, and why what had just passed between us could never be more than this single moment of awareness. "Yes," I managed. "Of course. I'll be there in a minute." Adrian nodded, but he didn't move immediately. Just looked at me one more time with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or relief that we'd stopped before crossing a line, or acknowledgement of something that now existed between us whether we wanted it to or not. Then he turned and walked back toward the patio, leaving me standing alone in the garden with my heart still racing and my entire understanding of myself fundamentally altered. I stayed in the garden for another 10 minutes, trying to compose myself, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to process the fact that Adrian, Celeste's husband, a man I'd known for 7 years without feeling anything inappropriate, had looked at me in a way that made every cell in my body respond, and that I'd looked back, had felt attraction so intense it was almost painful, had wanted things I absolutely should not want, had discovered I was capable of desiring someone I'd been certain I'd successfully categorized as permanently off-limits. When I finally returned to the party, I avoided Adrian for the rest of the evening, stayed on the opposite side of the patio, engaged in conversation with other guests, made sure I was never in a position where we'd be alone together, or even next to each other in a group. Celeste noticed nothing. She was busy hosting, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink, orchestrating the evening with the grace she brought to everything. She had no reason to suspect that her husband and her best friend had just shared a moment that changed everything, even though nothing had actually happened. I left earlier than I normally would have, claiming tiredness, hugged Celeste goodbye, waved at Adrian from across the patio without making eye contact, drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel and my mind replaying those 10 seconds of extended eye contact over and over, analyzing every micro-expression, every shift in Adrian's face, every sensation I'd felt in my own body. That was 3 months ago. 3 months of carrying the memory of that moment like a secret I can't share with anyone. 3 months of seeing Adrian and Celeste regularly and having to pretend nothing changed. 3 months of Adrian and I carefully avoiding being alone together, never letting our eyes meet for more than the briefest socially acceptable glance, maintaining appropriate distance in ways we'd never had to consciously maintain before. 3 months of wondering if Adrian thinks about that moment the way I think about it, if he lies awake at night replaying it, if he's struggled with the same confusion and guilt and unwanted desire that's been consuming me. We've never talked about it, never acknowledged that anything happened, just both understood without words being spoken that we needed distance and careful management of our interactions to protect Celeste and ourselves from whatever that moment awakened. 3 months of Celeste commenting occasionally that something seems off with me, asking if I'm okay, if something's bothering me, if our friendship is all right, and me lying every time, saying everything's fine, when nothing is fine and I don't know if anything will ever be fine again. Because that 10 seconds in the garden changed me, changed how I see Adrian, obviously. He's no longer invisible to me, no longer just Celeste's husband, but a man I'm intensely aware of in ways I never was before. But more than that, it changed how I see myself, changed my understanding of my own boundaries and desires, changed my certainty that I could control what I felt and who I was attracted to. I thought I knew myself, thought I understood my own limits and values and the lines I'd never cross, thought attraction was something that happened or didn't happen. And when it came to someone like Adrian, so clearly off limits for so many reasons, it simply wouldn't happen because I wouldn't allow it. But attraction, I've learned, doesn't ask permission, doesn't care about your boundaries or your ethics or your certainty that you'd never feel this way about this person. It just exists, sudden and overwhelming, awakened in a moment of unexpected eye contact in a garden at dusk. I never wanted Adrian. For 7 years, I genuinely never wanted him, never thought about him in any romantic or physical way, never imagined what it would be like to be with him, never felt anything beyond the platonic affection you feel for someone who's part of your extended social circle through friendship. Until the night he looked at me longer than he should have. Until his eyes held mine with an intensity that stripped away all the careful categorization I'd built around him. Until I felt my body respond in ways I couldn't control or prevent or wish away. Until I realized that want isn't always something you choose. Sometimes it chooses you. Appears without warning in a moment you can't prepare for or protect yourself against. Awakens something you didn't know was sleeping. And now I'm living with the aftermath. 3 months of this new awareness. 3 months of wanting someone I absolutely cannot have and should not want. 3 months of guilt every time I see Celeste, knowing I'm harboring feelings for her husband that she has no idea exist. 3 months of carefully maintained distance from Adrian. Both of us working hard to ensure we're never alone, never in a position where another moment might happen. 3 months of wondering if the intensity I felt was mutual, or if I've built an entire crisis out of a moment Adrian has already forgotten. 3 months of therapy trying to process these feelings and understand why they emerged when they did and figure out how to manage attraction I never asked for and don't want, but can't seem to make go away through sheer force of will. My therapist says, what I'm experiencing is normal, that attraction can emerge unexpectedly, that it doesn't make me a bad person, that what matters is what I do with these feelings rather than the fact that I have them. She says the extended eye contact in the garden was probably a perfect storm of circumstances. The romantic setting, the wine, the twilight hour, maybe something about my own emotional state that made me more vulnerable to connection. That it doesn't necessarily mean Adrian and I have some deep destiny or that these feelings are real and lasting rather than situational and temporary. She says maintaining distance is the right choice, that protecting Celeste's peace and my own integrity means not acting on feelings that could destroy lives, that eventually, with enough time and distance, the intensity will fade and Adrian will return to being just Celeste's husband rather than someone I think about constantly. I want to believe her, want to believe this is temporary, that 6 months or a year from now, I'll be able to look at Adrian and feel nothing but the platonic friendship I felt for 7 years, that this awakening of desire will prove to be a temporary aberration rather than a permanent shift in how I see him. But 3 months in, the wanting hasn't faded. The memory of that moment hasn't dimmed. The awareness of Adrian in any room hasn't decreased. If anything, it's intensified. Grown stronger with every careful avoidance, every deliberately casual interaction, every moment of pretending I don't notice him when noticing him is all I can do. I never wanted him. I need to be clear about that. For 7 years, Adrian existed in a category where want was impossible because he was so firmly off limits. I never looked at him and felt desire, never thought about him in any romantic capacity, never allowed myself to see him as anything other than Celeste's husband. But that night in the garden, under the dim glow of patio lights, with jasmine overwhelming the air and twilight creating an atmosphere of unreality, Adrian looked at me longer than he should have, and in those extended seconds of eye contact, something awakened, something powerful and unwanted and impossible to ignore. Not just attraction, though attraction was definitely part of it, but recognition. Like Adrian was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time, and I was seeing him. And in that mutual seeing, something shifted that can't be shifted back. The air changed between us. My heartbeat changed. My understanding of my own desires changed. My certainty about who I was and what I was capable of feeling changed. And for the first time in 7 years of knowing Adrian, I felt something I wasn't supposed to feel. Something dangerous. Something quiet but overwhelming. Something that lives in me now permanently, reshaping how I move through the world, how I see myself, how I navigate friendship with Celeste while carrying feelings for her husband that she doesn't know about, and I desperately wish didn't exist. 3 months of living with this. 3 months of trying to figure out what to do with desire that emerged in a single moment of extended eye contact. 3 months of carefully managed distance and deliberately casual interactions and lies by omission every time Celeste asks if I'm okay. 3 months of hoping the feelings will fade while fearing they won't. 3 months of wondering if Adrian feels what I feel or if I'm alone in this awakening. 3 months of learning that sometimes the most dangerous moments are the quiet ones. The ones where nothing happens except a look. The ones where eyes meet and hold and everything changes without a single word being spoken or a single line being crossed. I never wanted him, until I did. Until that night in the garden when Adrian looked at me longer than he should have, and I felt myself looking back with equal intensity. Until awareness replaced comfortable blindness. Until desire awakened where it should have stayed dormant forever. And now I'm living with the consequences of that moment. Trying to figure out how to be Celeste's friend while wanting her husband. Trying to maintain distance from Adrian while being constantly aware of his presence. Trying to return to not wanting when wanting has already taken root. Some moments change everything. Some looks rewrite your understanding of yourself and your boundaries and what you're capable of feeling. Some awakenings can't be reversed no matter how much you wish they could be. That evening in the garden, Adrian looked at me longer than he should have, and I was never the same again. The end.